Alright, we're going to start off with a few fun ones. This is for you guys to participate. You're either going to raise your hand or not raise your hand. Or would you rather, the first one's this, would you rather have hiccups for the rest of your life? You raise your hand on that one. Or keep your hands down, feel like you are always about to sneeze for the rest of your life. Alright, raise your hands if you'd rather hiccup the rest of your life. Keep your hands down if you'd rather sneeze. Mr. Stuart, who do you think won that one? I think more people want to sneeze. Don't you think so? Alright, very good. Second one. Would you rather only be able to whisper? Or would you rather be able to shout? Raise your hand if you want to whisper. Raise your hand if you'd rather whisper. Keep your hands down if you'd rather shout.
I know.
I think we got a bunch of shouters here. Who'd rather shout? All right, we have shouters in the crowd. I prefer the whisper, but that's just me. All right, last one. Raise your hand if you'd rather have accordion legs or hair that whistles in the wind. Raise your hand if you'd rather have accordion legs. All right. Obviously, my hand's down because I'd rather have hair. I don't care if it whistles or not. I'd rather have some hair on my head. So, all right. Pretty good. All right, now we're going to turn to Mr. Stewart. We got some questions for Mr. Stewart. Just to kind of get to know him a little bit. First question is this. If animals could speak, which do you think would have the most attitude? Cat. A cat? Why a cat?
This is very important. Cats just stare at you. I feel like they're judging you and thinking about you, and that's just they've got attitude, sass, whatever we want to call it.
Cat? How many cat people do we have in here? All right. How many think the only good cat is a dead cat? No. All right, so cat. If a cat could speak, they'd have the most attitude. Here's the next question. This is an important one because this is right up his alley. Which superhero is objectively, all right, objectively the best?
Who said that?
I'm going to say it, but you got to let me justify it.
No.
Batman is objectively best. This is why. Hold on. Number one. If this is all you learned today, this is worth it. Number one. Batman, just take Batman versus any other superhero. Okay, let's take Superman. Batman plus Kryptonite. No Superman. Take Iron Man. Okay, Batman plus EMP. No Iron Man. Strip all of their costumes, right? Superman doesn't have the sun. He's just a regular man. Iron Man, he doesn't have his money, and his suit is just a man. But if you have Batman, and you strip him of his suit, and his belt, and his money, he knows like a dozen forms of martial arts, which is better than a regular man, right? Isn't that good reasoning? So Batman.
All right, he gave some good objective reasons for that one. Now, I'm going off script here a little bit. DC Comics or Marvel?
DC.
We're pushing the envelope here with it. DC Comics or Marvel?
Come on, Mr. Stewart, DC.
I think Batman vs. Superman was the best movie that has come out. Deal with it.
Whoa!
Deal with it. So DC.
All right, DC. So does that mean you would prefer the League of Justice over the Avengers?
Yes.
Okay. All right, how many Avenger fans do we have? All right, League of Justice. Who doesn't care? Thank you. That really hurt his feelings, you know, especially you 10th graders that raised your hand about not caring about superheroes. Going off script here again. Where'd you grow up?
Well, I grew up just south of Philadelphia, Delaware County area, which was interesting. South Philly's interesting. I don't seem like I'm from South Philly, but I'm from South Philadelphia.
What brought you to King's Academy?
My wife. She wanted to be near the beach, so we had a choice between Missouri or coming here. And of course, we came here. And I knew a lot of people here already too, and they said great things about it. I love being around students, I love being around teenagers, and I thought I just want to keep doing this. So.
When did you decide which you wanted to major in college, and what brought you to your profession? What led you to?
Oh my goodness. No, I was going to go to college for art. So I was in AP art in high school. I was building my portfolio, and that was the thing I wanted to do. And then for some reason, I made a radical change just sort of right at the end of the semester, and wanted to actually get a degree in religion. For whatever reason, I still have no idea why to be honest, why I chose that. But I just felt the urge to do that, and I did it. I haven't regretted doing it. I'm still doing it.
Awesome. All right, here's a question for everybody that you can answer and maybe help someone in this room that might be struggling with this right now. Have you ever encountered doubt in your life? And what do you think could help students deal with doubt if they're experiencing it right now?
Okay, yes. And I still do. I don't know if that's weird to say, but I still do too. I find that a weird question because it sort of assumes that maybe you can't be a Christian and doubt at the same time, or if you doubt, maybe you're not saved or something of that sort. And I just don't find that to be true. Doubt has always sort of been a part of my life. I grew up in a Christian home, but I wasn't a Christian until probably college, maybe even late college. So I'm sort of new to the game in a way. Doubt has just been natural. I remember probably what first triggered it was stepping into college. I lost my best friend, and that was just the start of sort of the snowball effect. He died in a pretty horrible way too, and we were just about to go off to college, and that just started it. You know, and then that was just a trigger, not just for emotional doubt, but intellectual doubt too. It's not like I read a book and then I started doubting. It was just life hit me, and then it happened. But the thing is, I never, for a while, I guess growing up, I always suppressed it. You know, because where I kind of went to church, it was sort of immoral in a way. If you raised a question that, you know, everybody thinks they already know or you're supposed to believe. But I suppressed a lot of it, and it made things a lot worse for me when that stuff started to happen. My advice would be just to get it out. Start dealing with it. Don't ignore it. And it's okay to ask questions. Part of being a Christian is actually living with those questions. Remember, we are finite beings who trust in an infinite God. There's going to be mystery there. There's going to be paradoxes. And there's going to be questions. To me, that just seems natural. But it doesn't mean there aren't answers. And I have found that as I've sort of drawn those doubts out, and we don't like to do that because it makes us vulnerable. And I don't like to be vulnerable. But just putting them out there before me and wrestling with that has been, that's changed my life. Just having the guts to do that, and it does take guts. It takes faith to do that. But we all have them sitting in here. And just get them out and just finding someone to share them with, and then dealing with them. That's the way that I think. Okay.
Thank you. Let me just add a couple things. There's two things I go to whenever I struggle with doubt. And like you said, we all go through periods of doubt. And the first one is, I go back to when I trusted in Christ as my personal Savior and the change it made in my life. That's the first thing. The second thing I go to is the historical evidence of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Christianity has the best answer, proof of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Nobody can answer that. Nobody can disprove that. And even Paul says that if Jesus didn't rise from the dead, your faith is useless. And so I can always go back to, no matter doubt I have, I can go back that Jesus Christ is not in a grave. He rose again from the dead. And that helps me just to overcome doubt that might be in my life at times.
Can I add to that? That's how I deal with things. Because I've got all sorts of other peripheral questions. What do you do with people? You got Genesis 1, you got Genesis, right? You've got people in those first few chapters living to be hundreds of years old. Okay. How are we, those things are very difficult to wrestle with. But I try to come to those core issues and wrestle with those first. And then I'll deal with the things that are important, but sort of on the fringe. And I think to me, that's what did it for me was the resurrection. But the thing is, I got the chance to study under Gary Habermas, who's like the world's expert on it. That helped. But I think there is a lot of evidence for that too. That was the real kicker for me.
All right, fantastic. Question number 2. What do you think are some of the most common misconceptions of the Christian faith that you have encountered?
It's funny, because I purposely put myself in places where people will talk to me. I don't think they actually do, because I'm tall and I have a beard and I'm scary looking.
You look like Batman.
Okay, I'll go with that. But I think what I hear most from people is that faith is, I think that's the big misconception. It's not just non-believers, it's believers too. We kind of think it's this blind, wishful thinking. It sort of fills the gaps where our knowledge is absent in some way. And I don't find that to be the case at all. Like you were saying about the resurrection, faith happens when you rely on God, when He has shown Himself to be reliable. And I think where He has shown Himself to be reliable is exactly where what you were just talking about, the evidence for the resurrection. And so faith is, I don't like using that word, I like to use trust. And so it's one thing to have a knowledge of that information, it's another thing to entrust yourself to it. And so, but I think that it's this idea that it's blind and you're just sort of, regardless of what all the evidence says, I'm just going to sort of close my eyes and believe anyway. Sort of like, you guys watch Indiana Jones, right? Hopefully.
Yeah. That's what.
Okay, I know this is a problem.
Look up in the archives.
Indiana Jones is walking up to a cliff, and there's supposed to be a path there, but he can't see it, and he sort of clutches his chest, and he just sort of is hoping that it's there. There's no evidence that it's there, and he just takes a blind leap of faith and just steps down, and then he's lucky there's a path there. That's not biblical faith. People use that illustration all the time. That's not biblical faith. God doesn't ask us to trust in Him blindly. He gives us good reasons, however small or big or whatever nature they may be. I think that's the biggest misconception.
Great. Question 3. Why does it feel like God remains so hidden?
Okay. Why is God so hidden? I think for me at first, because I thought of that myself, and part of that is we think we only gain knowledge through perception, like our senses, like what we can see and hear and taste and touch, but you can't do that with God. There are other avenues toward knowledge. Think about it this way. Mr. Danley right now is running my advisory, and they're eating hot wings, and we usually do like a ping pong challenge for about 10 minutes or so. So they're having a good time. Now, I can't see him, I can't hear him, I can't touch him in any way, but I know that he is there because, number one, my memory. Also, maybe testimony. Maybe Mr. Kimball came up to me before this whole thing happened and told me he was in there. So I don't think having a knowledge of something or someone is so determined on our senses. I think that's a good, because for me, when I was a teenager, that's how things worked. I can't see God, therefore he doesn't exist or he's hidden. I think another way to answer this, which is a little bit more complex, but I think you guys can do it because I think it'll help. That God does keep us at arm's length a little bit for a reason. Now, that's not to say that deism is true or something like that. Obviously, God is involved in this world. But the idea would be he is present enough so that he can affirm our hearts and minds, but he's created enough of a distance so he doesn't overwhelm us. Can I give you an example that makes sense of that? If I gave Mr. Kolar a test here, and I said, whatever you do, don't cheat on this test. Now, as you were taking that test, I sort of leaned over your shoulder as you were taking it, and sort of overwhelmed you with my presence. Now, do you really feel like you have the option to cheat on this test in that situation?
Not with you right there. No.
Now you wouldn't cheat because you would be more likely afraid. And so, in a way, I've overwhelmed you to such a degree that your volition, your will, which I believe is free, that God has given us, has been so overwhelmed that it's almost been taken away from you. And so you do what I say simply because you're afraid of the consequences of me being right there. But if I were to remove myself a little bit from you, maybe I didn't walk out of the gym, but I just sort of went back there and graded some other papers and you took this test. I said, do not cheat. And you feel like you have a little bit more freedom.
Absolutely.
And I think, and if you chose not to cheat in that situation, I'm guessing it would not be out of fear, but out of respect. Would that be true?
Respect or love.
Sure. And so I think the choice you make there is more genuine. And it's also the choice I want you to make. And I think God does the same thing with us. He's given us free will. The thing is, if he overwhelms us with his presence, you can imagine an infinitely powerful being being fully expressed before you. You would be scared to death. We would choose him simply because we would be so afraid. And so I think to respect our free will, and also in order to gain our love, God approaches us a little bit more softly. Does that make sense? In a way where he's not just hovering right over you. And the way he does it is actually by coming to us and dying for us. And what greater expression of love can you make than that? To actually die for someone and say, your life is more valuable than my own. And I think that makes approaching such a being all that more, of that great power, all that more easier. So that we're not like Michael Scott from The Office when he says, he's asked, would you rather be feared or loved? And he says, both. I want people to be afraid of how much they love me. I think you've got to try to understand what God is trying to do. And I think he's respecting your free will there. And he's also, in doing that, keeping the option of love alive. I don't know. Does that help at all?
Yes.
Maybe, maybe not. All right. That's a hard question.
It was. Let's see if we can get one more in here. What is the best way that a student can become better at defending their faith? Where's somewhere a student can go to get the answers?
You have to do it. Experience. You have to do it. I don't, when I don't teach from, I've had to read a lot of books, and I still read a lot of books, but you get better at this, and you get more comfortable with this, and it helps you out a lot more when you actually go and do this stuff. So I know you guys have friends who aren't believers, and it would just be making that happen. For me, I grew up in an environment where when I went to high school, I didn't know a single Christian. Not a single Christian. I actually didn't find out that I had one classmate, who, her name was Amy, and she told me it was later in college, she somehow found out I became a Christian, and then told me she was too, and that she had, wished she knew that in high school. And not only did that make me feel horrible, but I realized how isolated I was at that moment. But, so I know you guys maybe aren't in that environment where you can share this stuff and engage with people on a regular basis. I mean, in South Philly, that's the case almost everywhere. But I would just find those avenues to do it and engage in those conversations. I just put myself out there. I would go to bookstores, and people talk to you in bookstores for whatever reason. You're pulling out books, and someone creeps up to you, and it's a little awkward, but you're looking at the same books, and conversation happens, and there you go. So I always think that's great. That's probably the biggest help. The other thing might be, you've got to talk to some of the teachers you have here. So you've got Mr. Eltram back there, who's a genius. You've got Mr. Kimball, who knows the Bible better than anybody else I know. I'm always in my classroom. I need something to do. Come by and talk to me so I still have a job. Just come by. I mean, students are usually in there. We're talking comics or something, but come by and have these conversations. Get the doubts out. Wrestle with this stuff. That's how you get better, is talking to people, not necessarily reading books. Because then you sound a little bookish. And the conversations you're going to have with people aren't really going to be that neat and clean like you maybe find in a book. So talk to people, engage in the stuff. It's fun too, at least I think.
All right, fantastic. That's our encouragement to you, is ask questions. Go to your teachers. We want this school to be where you're asking questions all the time. Come to our offices, Mrs. Jones' office, my office, Mr. Tolson. Your teachers, ask them questions. That's how you're going to be better preparing yourself to be able to defend the faith and apologetics. So let's give it up for Mr. Stuart.